questions, so you can reach me out or maybe Pio. Yeah, thanks for watching.
All right, thank you very much, Asif. With that, I'll just give you guys a few minutes. There you go. There's our next speaker. Good morning, Javier.
Hi, Pio. Good afternoon to you. How are you?
Yeah, yeah. So our next session for tonight is monitoring and troubleshooting SQL Server environments using free community tools with Javier Villegas. So Javier is a MVP for data platform based in Argentina. Let me just quickly go here. All right. So yeah, so that's our next session. Like I said, Javier is a MVP for data platform. He's an IT director for Mediterranean shipping. Did I get that incorrect? Yeah,
Company,
yeah, shipping
Mediterranean
company.
Shipping Company, MSC.
Yeah. So he's also he's a speaker, a conference speaker for SQL Pass and all the other conferences out there. Group by Yeah, and right now he's also serving as a board member for the Microsoft Azure Data Community Advisory Board. So welcome to Singapore, Javier. Oh,
Thank you, Pio. Thank you for the invitation again.
yeah. There's actually your second time with Singapore Data Platform, right? We have you
Ac-
on SQL Sat.
yeah, yeah. It's my second time. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll give you the floor so that you can start.
All right. Thank you so much. So let me share my screen. Um, here we go. Okay, can you see my screen?
There you go. We can see your screen.
Excellent. Very good. All right, then. So let's start. Thank you, Pio. Thank you, everyone, to be here today on this session that I call SQL Performance Monitoring and Troubleshooting using free community tools. This is a session that I've been delivering over the last few months because I noticed that I've been using all these tools a lot. So I just put everything on a small presentation and we'll try to share with you all and, well, see if we can all share a little bit about these techniques. Most of them, you may know it, some others maybe not, but the idea is to expand our toolbox to have additional resources in order to do, monitoring and troubleshooting. And, the main idea here is to use free tools. Some of these tools are provided by Microsoft within Management Studio, Azure Data Studio, etc. And some others are provided by community experts, which they are sharing with all of us. So, well, as Pio mentioned, my name is Javier Villegas. I live in Buenos Aires, Argentina, 9 a.m. here. I work at Mediterranean Shipping Company for about 15 years, and I've been involved with SQL Server for over 25 years, and most recently with Azure SQL. I'm MVP in the data platform category since 2016, and recently became Microsoft certified trainer. I'm also define myself as a technical speaker. I would like to, go to every conference, user groups, or sessioning where we can all sit together and start sharing something. I am also a member of the local SQL Argentina group, and where we have our meetup and our monthly sessions. And I'm also part of an initiative called Azure NL Bar, which is basically a podcast that we do with another colleagues from Latam, basically to talk about technology, but in a more relaxed way, with no presentation, no demos. So it's more like interviews with colleagues and friends. So on the left side of the panel, you have all my contact information, email, Twitter, LinkedIn, and my blog. If you would like to reach me to discuss something related to this presentation or anything you would like to touch base, just ping me, and I'm happy to contact with you. So this is how I would like to define the whole process, right? Every professional, every DBA have their own set of tooling to do findings, to do fixes, to troubleshoot, etc. Right? Over the years, we've been collecting all these scripts and things that we all use. But something that I like to emphasize a lot is on the training, especially for the developers, right? When we get into a company in where we get all these SQL environments, something that we definitely need to spend time, quality time with the developers is on telling them about the best practices, how to write the SQL code. Because, you know, if you do that regularly, right? If you discuss a specific statement or how to use the best practices in terms of writing the SQL code, etc., that's going to help you guys on the monitoring and the troubleshooting a lot, right? Because you know that they will at least try to base on these best practices to write the SQL code. This is extremely important, and I found this really valuable over the years, that spending a few hours a month with the developers, just emphasizing on a specific piece of code, or if you find something to share that can be, let's say, written on a different way, on a more performant way, that's definitely going to help everybody's lives, right? Because your monitoring and troubleshooting will be easier or more relaxed, I would say. So if we go to the troubleshooting process itself, I define this like a continuous operation. This is not something that you're going to do once, you're going to fix it, and that's it. This is something that has to happen all the time, right? And with that, we can define all these steps within the process, which is, first of all, observe the behavior by capturing counters and metrics. We know that within SQL Server, we have several specific counters that we have to pay a lot of attention: I/O, memory, CPU usage. So we should capture all these metrics along the way, right? Then when we find a particular problem, right, we need to adjust by fixing that problem, release it, apply it, and repeat the overall process continuously, right? Observe again, keep capturing, right? When we get something, we get it, we fix it, we apply it, and we repeat constantly, right? This is something that I found, and sometimes DBA say, okay, I found this, I applied, and that's it. No, this is something that have to happen constantly, right? So it's extremely important. And what I found also useful is to come up with what we call baseline. Right? Baseline is these counters, these metrics that we collect on a normal activity day. So when we are running into troubles with CPU pressure, I/O pressures, etc., we have something to compare with, right? And easily we can narrow down where the problem is. That's going to help us a lot of identifying where the problem is and taking the necessary actions to do it. So getting these baselines is something that I definitely push you to do it. So on the agenda, these are some of the things that we will be covering today. You will see that the first half of the points that are described here are stuff that is coming with Microsoft tooling, right? Performance Monitor, Profiler, stuff within within Management Studio, right? Extended Event, Query Store. And then the second part of the list is focus on community solutions that will help us to do the monitoring and troubleshooting. And as I said at the beginning, the goal here is to use all these tools which are free, completely free, right? So you don't have to pay anything for them. So let's start. Performance Monitor and Profiler. Well, most probably all of you are familiar with these two tools, and when we started working with SQL Server, those are some of the tools that you use on the very first day, right? With Performance Monitor, you have the possibility of capturing and also, seeing and also capturing all the counters related to the host itself, including the operating system, disk, memory, CPU, processes, and SQL Server counters, right? So you have the possibility of seeing all these counters live, right? And also you can store it into a file and keep it capturing for a certain period of time, right? This is something that will help you to build this baseline. On the other hand, we have SQL Server Profiler. This is a tool that is available with SQL Server since the very first version, right? It's a feature that right now Microsoft has discontinued. What discontinued means, you can find it on the most recent SQL Server version, but they are not investing in the tool anymore. They have another technology to replace that functionality that we're going to be covering later on, but it's discontinued. What can you do with Profiler? Well, basically you can define a bunch of events and see what is happening on your database, on a specific database, all the statements, all the stored procedures, executions, runtime statistics, etc., and you can again sit online, sit live, and also capture it and save it into a trace. What not everybody knows is that there is an interesting way that you can use to combine the output of Performance Monitor and Profiler, right? Within Profiler, you can import a Performance Monitor trace, and in a single screen, you can have both activity from the host, SQL counters, and SQL activity, right? And this way, you can narrow down your troubleshooting on a specific time frame, right? And compare what was happening at this specific point in time in terms of host counter, CPU, memory, I/O activity, and which SQL Server statement were running at that specific time. This is something that I found really valuable, and we're going to see it live later on. Then we have a set of tools that are coming within SQL Server Management Studio. In this case, what I always recommend is just to stay up to date with Management Studio, because Microsoft is releasing versions or new updates regularly, once a month, once every 2 months. And well, it's important to have the latest and greatest version. There is one tool within Activity Monitor, within Management Studio, which is called Activity Monitor. Again, maybe most of you already know it, in where you can check all the active queries, expensive queries, IOs, processes, etc. Right? This is something that we've been using forever. But there is something that was introduced recently as a SQL Server feature, which is called lightweight query profiling, which came in SQL Server 2019, but it can also be enabled using a trace flag in 2016 and 2017. This way, you can, let's say, address this problem in where, for example, one day you have one process that is running on the server and you get your manager would say, hey, at which point of the execution we are at? Is it about to finish? Is it just starting or what? Well, before we didn't have the possibility of knowing this in advance. Well, now with this lightweight query profiling, the SQL engine provided an estimate query progress. So you can see it live, which is the estimated query progress in percentage, right? It's 20%, 50, 90, and with that, you know, or you have an estimate or where you are at, so you may know how long it's going to take to finish, right? Within Activity Monitor, you can check this. So we're going to see it later on. Additionally, within SQL Server Management Studio, you have this performance dashboard report. This is something that in the past, you had to go to the Microsoft website and download some sort of script to apply and create certain objects within the MSDB database. So then you can download this, which is basically a set of reporting services files, and come up with this nice performance dashboard reporting where you can see a bunch of important information, not only related to the performance, but also related to the database or the data that you have, like, for example, table sizes, index sizes, etc. But we can also see, active transactions, CPU usage, IO, weights, etc. Right? This is something that, again, comes with Management Studio, really easy to use, and of course, free. Well, then we have what is called dynamic management objects. This is a set of read-only objects, views, and functions, right, that SQL Server use to, let's say, communicate with the outside, with the DBAs, right, to provide you a bunch of information about different, health conditions, different processes, different activities, or different, features. For example, you can check, using some of these DMBs, you can check active transaction, log running transaction if there are logs. For the indexes, you can check how the indexes are being used, if SQL Server is proposing missing indexes, more specifically, if you are using high availability with availability groups. You also have a set of DMBs that you can query to check the status, the health of the availability group. So for every single thing that you may have within SQL Server, there is a huge set of DMBs and DMF that you have available to use. Something important to mention here is that every single solution in the market, free, coming from Microsoft, third-party tools, paid solution, etc., is basing and relying on these dynamic management objects to come up with, a dashboard, with a report, with everything, right? This is how SQL Server communicate with us in terms of, operational and runtime information for everything, right? So using this information, combining it, and maybe render it into a nice way, we can have all these tools. But again, these are the source of every single solution to do monitoring and troubleshooting, and we're gonna rely on them a lot to do, troubleshooting processes. Then we have extended events. Well, remember we briefly mentioned SQL Server Profiler before, right? Which is this user interface, this tool that we use to do troubleshooting. This tool, Profiler is quite powerful, but it's a little bit risky because if it is not used properly, and let's say that you are in the middle of a troubleshooting process, if you are not using it properly, you can cause more problems to the environments than the one you are trying to figure it out and to solve, right? So, it's a heavy tool. It's quite, let's say, heavy in that area. So that is why Microsoft back in 2008 released these extended events, which are a set of lightweight events that you can program within SQL Server to capture every single activity on the SQL Server, right? This is important because you can have, you can configure your extended event session to do the same thing that you were doing before with Profiler, but in a more effective way, right? You can set the output to a file, to memory as a ring buffer, etc., and you can, store this information in these extended event files, and then use it to troubleshoot it. We're gonna see then in action. For example, if you're trying to capture deadlock information, if you're trying to capture a long-running statement, you say, okay, I want to create an extended event session that gets me all the statement, all the store procedures that are taking more than 3 minutes to complete, right? You can easily do it with extended event, which is, again, an important technique to use to do troubleshooting. So here are some of the components that you may find within extended event, and you will see that it's quite easy to correlate it with Profiler at some point. But then we have the query plans within Management Studio, right? If we are doing troubleshooting on a specific store procedure and a specific query, we always use Management Studio to get the execution plan, either estimated or actual, and reading the query plan, try to understand what the problem may be, and also based on that, get an action plan to do a fix, right? Within Management Studio, you can see the query plan is quite interesting. You can see it in an XML way, on a text way, and also in a graphical, mode. And now we're gonna jump to the first external tool, right, which is Plan Explorer. This is a free tool, right, that you can use to get the plan, and you can visualize it and do troubleshooting easier because this tool is extremely powerful. It will help you to identify where you have the the problems with it within your query plan, where you are using most of the time, all the different operators, etc. And is specifically for execution plan. So you can do the same with Management Studio, but maybe if you are running into a big plan, which is you have to scroll a lot, etc. With this tool, you can do it more effectively, right? So quite interesting to use, and again, it's completely free. Query Store. Well, this is a feature that was released on SQL Server 2016 Service Pack 1, and basically what allows you to do is to have like a flight recorder within your SQL Server, right? So on your user database, you enable Query Store, and what you're gonna get is all the runtime statistics for every single statement store procedure running against that specific user database, right? And you will also see all the execution plans that were used, and also later in 2017 you can also see the different weights, right? This is a feature that is quite useful, quite important, and was or is the base of many other features that came after Query Store or at the top of Query Store, like automatic query tuning and few others, right? This is a feature that comes in SQL Server, as I said, 2017 and before. Is a feature that you have to manually enable on the user databases, right? If you use SQL Server. If you use Azure SQL, you don't have to enable it. It is enabled by default, right? But on SQL Server, it's something that you have to enable. What can you do with Query Store? Well, basically, for a specific query, you can track all the runtime. So how many times it was executed during the last, hour, minimum execution time, maximum execution time, average, I/O usage, reads, writes, TempDB usage, etc. And also you can see it graphically, and you can also see it on as a dashboard, right? An additional thing that you can do with Query Store is that eventually, if you find that a specific query has changed the execution plan for any reason, you can manually force, right, to use a specific plan that was used before. This way, you can force and decide which plan to use for a specific process, right? We're going to see it in action in a minute. So let's jump to my virtual machine and let's check a few things. First of all, let's see in action this feature called lightweight query profiling, right? If you're running on SQL Server 2019, again, it is enabled by default. So you can get your query, you can enable, include live query statistics, right? And when you run this, you see down here, right? Down here that you have your execution plan, right? But here, see what we have, the estimated query progress. So we see at which point of the execution we are at, and we can, take decisions based on that. Also, we have the same value down here, right? We can also run this other one that I have down here, and again, we see it live, and we see the estimated query progress just growing in percent, right? As the query is progressing, right? We see the estimated query progress. So this is really, really interesting, and we can see this in action. But now you can tell me, okay, this is nice, but I don't run my queries through Management Studio. I run my queries from my web server, my application server, etc. So how can I see which is the estimated query progress of the query that I'm running? So to do that, I have here a script which is basically generating some random activity in one of my user databases that I have on my virtual machine. So this is running. So then I go to my SQL Server activity monitor. Right? When I see the activity monitor, it's going to take a few seconds to populate. We see, all the processes that are running, information related to the IOPS for the files, right? Recent expensive queries, and if we go to the bottom, we see active expensive queries. So we see all the stuff that is running right now, right? Again, this is my demo workload. So I can go to any of the sessions, do right click, and here, right, see show live execution plan. So when I go here, right, you can see for something that is not running from Management Studio, it's running from my external application, the estimated query progress. And again, you know, with this value, you can know how long it may take to complete, or, knowing this value, you can take better decisions on what to do. This is something that before we were blind, right? We were able to see all this, right? But we don't know at which point of the execution we were at. So now we do. So really, really interesting. Additionally, as I said, we have the report, right? And we have this set of reports that they come with Management Studio. So I went to a specific user database, so we got into the context of the user database. So we can, let's say, for example, go here, reports, and we can say, show me transaction performance analysis overview. So it's going to come up with this report and will, do me an analysis of, in this case, data. We can also go at server level and see reports. We have another, context, like, for example, I don't know, top transaction by log. So, we have all this that we can see it in action. Well, now it's saying that there is no one here. So we check another one. Batch execution statistic, right? So we see all these reports live. And again, we didn't have to go and get any third-party tool, right? So with that, we have everything through SQL Server. Let me cancel this. Yes. So then we mentioned performance monitor, in where we can see again multiple counters and add it and see them live, right? And also we can generate this collection set and save it into files. We also have profiling, where we can see the activity within our SQL Server. So let me open one of the files that I captured in the past, right? So this is an activity that I have on my server. This is all SQL, right? So it's reading the file. Now it's finished. And now I can do this from file, import performance data, right? Here. So then we can get the data that we capture from performance monitor, right? And here are all the counters that I captured back then when I was running this performance monitor. So I would like to see, processor time, total processor time. I would like to see, in terms of SQL statistic, batch requests per second, compilation per second. I also like to see logins per second. What else? Transaction, for example. And then for the specific databases, we can see, I don't know, active transaction, So we can choose all the counters that we would like to correlate. And, we can also check in terms of host counters, like, for example, on the storage, the activity, the idle time on the disk. When we select the counters that we want, we can correlate both the performance monitor counters with what we got before. So if I go to this point in time, right, I can see all the values, right, at this specific point in time, but I can also see what was happening on the SQL Server at that point. I will check another point, right, and if you see, this one is changing to putting the context of this specific time. If eventually I would like to zoom on a specific area, I can do it and go more granular, right? So it's quite interesting because you can see all those counters and correlate how the server was behaving at the overall level, like host, CPU, IOPS, and what the SQL Server was doing at that specific time. So this is something that I like a lot. So let's close this one too, and then we can go and check quickly extended events. Right, so close these guys. Okay, this is what we can do with extended events. Let me just uncomment a few things here. This is an extended event session, right, that basically will capture all the SQL Server errors that we see, right, running on the on this specific instance. I call the session extended event SQL errors. The event that I like to capture is error reported, right? If you remember from Profiler, you also have this event. For actions, basically, you can select which are the columns that you would like to retrieve. And if you have a specific predicate, like, for example, I don't care about this specific error number or this one, and this one, right? You can create your own predicate. You can specify a target. In this case, is a file on the file system, and few other settings for the session. When we have this, right, we create the session, we start the session, right, and now this is running in background all the time. How do we see that? We go to here, management, extended events, session, and here we have the one that we just created. So what can I do with this? For example, here, this is saving asynchronously on a file in the file system on a pseudo XML format, right? Then down here, I have a query that basically what it does, it grabs that XML, right, and come up with a more useful format to read it, right? So here I can see all the errors that we are seeing on the SQL Server right now. So what I will do here is I will generate few errors randomly, right? First of all, I will do a division by 0, and now we have, an error message here. Then I will create a store procedure, right, which is doing also the division by 0 and also doing a select for an object that doesn't exist, right? So if I execute this store procedure, I'm gonna get errors. I can, generate error. I can do also a syntax error, right? So every single error that is happening on the instance, it's being captured, right? So I run again my query to parse that output, right, and see what we can get here. We see the number of errors, right? How many times we saw the errors, the message, which database, which is the statement, which is the store procedure, if it is a store procedure, which is the application name, the host name, and the username. So, for example, if you are releasing a new or an update on your application, and maybe you would like to capture all the errors right away to see if there is something that you can address quickly, this is extremely useful, right? Because again, it's simple, it's lightweight, and it is running all the time. And if there is a let's execute this. Let's execute the store procedure that doesn't exist, for example, so I can do it several times. Again, I run my query, and here I have the error message that happened 12 times, could not find a store procedure SP2, right? So, and like this, you can also capture, for example, all the deadlock information. You can get the deadlock info on the XML file and have it in there. You can, as I said, create the extended event session to capture long-running statement and those kind of things, and will help you to do troubleshooting and optimize the code on your SQL Server. So really, really useful, lightweight, and this is extended event. Quickly, I have a quick demo on the query store, right? What I did here is I create a brand new database. I create a table with a few columns, one store procedure, and I populate the table with random data. So if we do a select here, we see the random data. I will enable query store here, right? Alter database, set query store on, right? And what I'm gonna do next is I will execute this store procedure on a table. The table has no index right now, so I will execute it 20 times, right? When I execute it, I go to the database, do right click, and then I go to here, query store, and we have some predefined reports, like for example, top resource consuming queries, right? So when I go here, you see that we see our code that was executed 20 times with a minimum duration of 2.62, a maximum of 281. It was executed 20 times, as I said, and we see the plan here, right? We see the execution. So now I go back to here, and what I will do is I will create a non-clustered index on the table, and I will execute this store procedure again 25 times, right? It just ran, good. I go back to my report, I will refresh, right? And now we see here that I have two different plans for the same query ID. So I can go one or the other. We see that the query plan 2, right, with the plan ID 2, ran faster than the original one. And we can check it here. For example, right, the plan 2, it was executed 25 times, and minimum duration, maximum duration, and way lower than before, right? We can also go back here, create another index, right? Run it again, let's say 50 times, right? And when we go back to query store, we refresh what we see. Now we have, another plan, right, for the same query. And we can go through all the previous plan, and eventually, if I want to force to use this plan, I can just go here and just force it, and it will use that plan from that point onward. So here we can have, this is a simple query with the only query running on my SQL instance on my user database. So I can, we should see one, but imagine all the things that you can do with all your live activity on the server, right? You can get all the queries here, and you can, check and correlate the performance information. So let's go back here to the presentation. Here, oops. Current slide here. All right, so let's go with the second part, which is the community tools, right? These are some things that you may you should probably heard. Hey DBA, why my application is slow? Why my queries are taking longer, right? So this is the idea today, to try to find out an easy way to reply to this question. Well, first one, SP who's active. Well, this is a must-have tool created several years ago by Adam Mechanic. Basically it's a store procedure that you can install it in your SQL Server. You can run it as many times as you want, right? It's quite, fast, and you can take a picture of what the SQL Server is doing at that specific point in time, right? So it's a picture of all the sessions, for how long it's been running, which are the resources that I use, the reads, writes, CPU, is taking a picture of what is happening on the SQL Server at that point. So for example, if you receive that phone call saying, hey, my SQL Server is running slow, this is one of the first things that you may need to do. Take a picture and see what's happening at that specific point in time, right? It's a picture of now, right? So you can maybe find that there are certain logs, right, that you may need to address, or you have a set of sessions that are taking most of the resources, or you have weights on a specific resource like IO, etc. But again, you run it and you have this picture of the current status. As we said earlier, is based on dynamic management views, right? And doing certain joins, you can see this picture in real quick. Basically, you can run it as it's come, SP who's active, right? But there is also an extensive documentation in where you can specify some parameters to get into an expert mode, for example, or if you would like to analyze something in particular like query plans, right? There are a set of parameters that you can use. Here in the presentation, you have the link SP who's active. Again, this is a must-have for every DBA on every server, because it's lightweight, it's really useful, and again, it's free. Then several years ago, I create my own version of SP who's active called SP DBA currently exec, stand of currently executing, right? Which is basically a subset of SP who's active, but capturing a specific set of information that I needed back then, and also render it into different ways. For example, if with this version, if there is a set of logs or the change of log in your system at this point in time, it will return two result set, right? The first result set with all the activity on the server, but the second result set, it will just point out all the sessions that are involved in the log, right? And with that, you can troubleshoot logging in easier, right? But again, it's a subset or a parser through currently executing, right? It is also available on my GitHub, and it's free and open source, so you can contribute if you would like to. Then we have the solution from Brent Ozar called First Responder Kit, right? This is a set of store procedures that help you to go through different points within your SQL Server. For example, you have SP Blitz and SP Blitz first, right? Those are the starting point. Let's start with SP Blitz first. Basically, what it does is going to do an analysis of what's happening on your server right now, and it will provide you a report of things that you may need to address, but it has, you know, this column which is kind of the importance, right? So it's going to be sorted out in terms of importance. So if there are things that you need to address like real quick, it's going to have the importance like a 1. But if there are things that, you know, are more like warning and you have to address them, but you know, it is not that important at this point, it's going to have a lower importance in that column, and you will have it and see it, you know, right away. Right? What is really nice from this solution is that besides pointing out where the problem is and what the problem is, it will provide you with a set of link information to go to internet and you know, help you to fix that particular situation, right? So with explanation, with use case, other use case that you may need to, you know, read and understand to combine with what you see and apply it into your system, right? Again, this is why my SQL Server is slow in this particular moment. Then there is SP Blitz, which performs an analysis of the SQL Server usage since the last time that it was started, right? Since it started. So you start the SQL Server and it's been running for 5 days, and you would like to, you know, get an analysis of the whole usage. Well, you have this SP Blitz with the same concept. It will report, it will provide you this specific report with all the points that it found, right? With this important column and the documentation that will help you to understand what's going on. Additionally, you have SP Blitz Index, which will allow you to get an insight on how you are using the indexes, right? If there are used properly, if there are missing indexes, if there are duplicate indexes, you know, if there are indexes that are created but are not in use, right? So it's quite interesting. Then, you know, there used to be a way that now is discontinued. You can find it on maybe on a previous version. By the way, you can subscribe to Brent Ozard First Responder Kit. You're going to get an update version every month, more or less, right? And there is a way in where you can run SP Blitz first and SP Blitz using a SQL shop every, you know, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on your need. Save the output into a user table, right? And then there used to be this Power BI dashboard that allow you to see the activity, you know, in a graphical way, right? He's not maintaining or supporting this anymore, but I believe that you can just go and check on an older version and grab it, right? And will work. Then we have the SQL Server Tiger team, right? That they have this tool called BPCheck, right? BP stands for Best Practice Checker. You run this on your SQL Server instance, and it will provide you again with this report, which basically will tell you how your SQL Server is configured based on the best practices, right? And if there is something that is not following the best practices, it will point it out, right? And it will tell you, hey, this particular setting is not configured properly. For example, if you have the system databases on the C drive, if you have the 10DB with one file and growing by 10%, all those kind of things that are, you know, off from the best practices, right? you're gonna get this report that will help you to find those items and take the necessary actions to fix them. What is the goal from this, and also from the solution that we saw before from Brentosar? That we take the necessary actions to fix all the things coming from those reports, right? And run the tool again, right? And come up with no output, right? That means that our instance is running properly. So best practice checkers, BPCheck is also on the Tiger Team GitHub repository. You can download it and use it for free. There is another set of tools from Glensberry called SQL Server Diagnostic Queries. You can download those queries based on your SQL Server version, right? So there is one specific script depending on the SQL Server version that you use, and he also has created the version for Azure SQL Database and for managed instance. Really interesting. Again, you run it against your instance, and it will provide you with this extensive report, right? On every single setting, every single configuration, how the SQL Server being used, how the resources are used, and if there is any warning or anything that you may need to address, it will point it out, right? So really, really, really nice. I like this solution a lot. You can see that all the solutions that we've been discussing, maybe there are some overlapping in terms of functionality in one of the other. You can see, oh, maybe this one is doing the same that this other, right? The thing is that we should know the different solutions. Maybe there is one that is more specific for our scenario or for our situation right now. So knowing all of them is important because, again, we can use one or the others or all of them if we want to, right? Or if we are more familiar or more comfortable with one than the other, right? So again, they are not all 100% the same. There are several points of contact, right? But it's nice to have them all, to know them all. And well, to start closing it, we have DBA tools, right? Which is a community-based PowerShell solution, right? Which is completely free, right? And is I find myself today using a PowerShell ISE, for example, or Visual Studio Code more than Management Studio, because you can. This is really useful when you have to administer or use multiple SQL servers, right? If you need to do something specific for several servers that are spread across the network, across different countries or anything, this is really useful because you can, with PowerShell easily go to multiple servers from a list and do actually everything that you would like to do. For example, there are certain tools within DBA tools that allow you to, set, configure, or check anything within SQL Server, like availability groups, status of your backups, database settings, when was the last DBCC, things related to replication, check how you have the SP configure setting, if you are using a failover cluster, a specific thing related to failover cluster. So actually everything, right? So for example, you need to grab data from all your SQL Server, you use DBA tools with a list of servers and 2 lines of code, just go and retrieve that from all the servers. Extremely powerful, extremely useful. I encourage you to take a look on what DBA tools is. Finally, Azure Data Studio, right? This is something that Microsoft came is like the brother of Management Studio. The big difference is that it's multi-platform, right? Management Studio runs only in Windows. Azure Data Studio also runs in Linux and Mac, and it has this concept of Jupyter notebooks, right, in where you can combine on a single script multiple languages and also store the result. Most of the solution that we saw before, BPCheck and Glensberry Diagnostic Query, you also have the version as an Azure Data Studio notebook, right? So you have the script, the .SQL script, or the notebook. If you need to do your SQL maintenance, right? We know all the Hallengren solution maintenance solution is the must do, because with a single solution, you are following all the best practices on how to do index rebuild, index reorganize, update the statistics, backups, etc. So extremely useful. So let's quickly check some of the things that we saw. I'm running out of time. Again, I will run my random warlock against my user database, and I will go check SP who's active, right? So the solution that we saw from Adam Mechanic. Again, you see, we can run it all the times we want. It comes up really quick, and it will provide us with a lot of useful information. The session ID, the query text, login, the weight information, CPU usage, 10 dB allocation, reads, writes, memory use, from which host we are running it, the database, and the application name, right? We can run it, as many times as we want, and we always will see all the activity. If I close my script here, we'll see we run it and it come up empty. That means that there is nothing running on my SQL Server, right? Then, SP currently exec, as I said, it's, kind of, well, it's deleting now, so we won't see much, but we can also see, the same information. We can just go here, check which is the SQL text that is being executed right now. So really useful. Let's close this guy. So then we quickly jump to Azure Data Studio, and we see, for example, the Azure SQL Diagnostic Query information, right, in where we can run it and get all the queries that Glenberry has on this solution, right? For example, if I want to check how my page live PLE is configured, we can just check it right away. We can run them all query sizes. So again, we can run this, or we can run one by one, right? And if we go jump, for example, to PowerShell ISC, right? I will finish up with this. We can run this invoke DBA diagnostic query on my specific server, right? And if I run this, I get the helper to check which of the Glenberry script I would like to run. Each of the queries has a query number and a name. So, for example, I would like to see table sizes. So I go here, and I get all the tables information for a specific instance, right? So extremely useful. Another one from DBA tool called test DBA this speed. You just run it, right? And it will tell you all the MDF and LDF files that you have on the system. How is the read performance and the write performance, right? And it will give you a very good and okay, a warning or something to check out. So, really powerful solution. Again, especially if you need to do all this activity in multiple servers, not in just one. All right, so I go. Okay, here's some free resources to keep learning. The reference here to most of the things that we check and we saw today. Links to the Azure SQL fundamental documentation. A reminder that we need to start upgrading our SQL Server because most of them are running out of support. And with that, just conclude my presentation. If I don't know if there are any questions, Pio.
Yeah, there are a number of questions on the chat. Let's start with the first one. Regarding live query statistics, Damien asked, can it affect the instance performance, or is it using client resources? Is it safe to use in production? Basically, I think that's what he wants to know.
Well, actually, if you use SQL Server 2019, it is enabled by default, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can, you have it there. The goal is, and the feature name is lightweight query statistic. So Microsoft ensured that it quite lightweight, right? It's not adding additional, activity on your server. You can use it safely, I would say. I never see any problem by using it. Right. So, and again, if you are using 2017 or 2016, there is a trace flag that you can enable to have this lightweight query statistic up and running.
All right. I think that answers his question. There's a question from Gary. Can you create your own query for the report? What to use to create? I think he's asking about the dashboard reports on SSMS.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I have mine in where, it's basically you can use the report server builder, and if there is certain specific information that you would like to have on report, you can do it. Actually, there is a way, I didn't show it in my presentation, but you have the standard report and then you have the custom report, right? So you can create your own RDL file, put it there, and use it against your SQL Server to render it.
Yeah, those are essentially RDL files, so you can add your own from the custom report.
Correct.
Piyush is asking, do you have to be on the server, or you can open Perfmon and trace collected from a different server on your local machine? I think he's asking about when you demo
Performance monitor
the data
and
collector.
profile. Yeah. Ideally, it should be on your workstation, not on the server, right?
Yeah.
And especially if it is production, right? So yeah, that it's not. You must.
You shouldn't be running it on production. That should be
Yeah.
Can you share the slide? Yeah, the slides have a lot of important links. If you cannot share the slide, is there somewhere that they can go to? Do you have it in your blog that they can find the link?
If you go to my GitHub, right, you will have the presentation and the script. I don't have my GitHub here, but it's I guess it is. Let me just check where I have it. But yeah, the idea is to put everything in there. Let me just quickly. So here's my GitHub. There's going to be, I will put it in the chat window as well. There's going to be an entry called, I can call it, let's say, DataSessions Singapore, right? It's going to be in a couple of hours. And you're going to have the presentation as well as the scripts I use. But just you can see, most important is just to, from the slide, go to the reference and go download all the solutions that, again, are free.
Oh, yeah. And then there's one other thing. Can you share those error
I
code?
can hear you, Pio.
Sorry. Can you share those error code numbers that you try to check in your query? If you can
From
clarify
extended
your question?
events, maybe.
I think so.
I guess that from extended events. I guess
Okay.
what it's referring is to this ones. Basically, these errors are some of them are the warning that you have when you do a backup, a transaction log backup, or those kind of things. So I just try to exclude the ones that I don't need. For example, you are familiar with that message that you get all the time in Profile that you change from one database to the other, right? So change context and the database. So I'm excluding all those because I know that they are not useful. Again, I will share this as it is. This is custom for my needs, right? I mean, maybe I'm skipping one error number that is important for you. So you can start by no predicate and then adding then in the future, right? So that's what I suggest.
All right. That's the last question on the chat. So thank you very much, Javier. It was a very full pack session. There's a lot of items that
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I like this because again, I try to collect all the solution and quickly try to put everything in a 1 hour presentation with the a sneak peek of each of them with quick demos. I really noticed useful along the way. A bunch of people told me and contact me later. Oh, I'm using all this. I didn't know, so I'm using this in production right now. So thanks. So I really like to deliver this presentation a lot.
All right. Yeah, so I think that's it for tonight. If you have any other question or if you want to evaluate the session, you use the same link earlier and then just choose Javier session. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good
All
night.
right. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you,
Javier.
Javier, for it's an excellent session. Thanks a lot for your time here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. A very nice session.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.